First and foremost, we'd like to inform our panelists and our audience that we are recording this session tonight.
Okay. Hey, I'm hearing Camilla Hanks just called me. She's saying she's having technical difficulties coming into the link. So if you could give her a couple of minutes or one or two, she's trying to access the link. She's having she doesn't have video. So this is she's letting me know this right now. So I'm just
thank you, Ranti.
Okay.
Thank you.
You know what? I really dislike these Zoom forums, man. I don't like it. I'd rather be in person. This Zoom stuff is I'm tired of it, man. I'm tired of it. Tired of it.
Hopefully sooner than later, right? We can all it's certainly more we can it's more sincere, it's more yeah, I definitely understand. I sent an email to Ms. Hanks, and so just out of respect, I'm gonna at least begin these opening remarks. So good evening. We'd like to inform the panelists and our audience that we're recording this session tonight. My name is Sean Ghazala. My pronouns are he, his. I am a resident of the 50th District. I work with a local public health community organization, and I am one of the co-founders of Plea for the Fifth. Plea for the Fifth is Staten Island's news source for grassroots independent journalism. We are a group that launched our news coverage in December 2020 under 9 principles. Among them, we strive for journalism that empowers Staten Island and believe in ethical news coverage that reflects the neglected in our communities, namely Black, Indigenous, people of color, LGBTQ+, immigrants, people with disabilities, youth, the elderly. We're concerned with the conditions that affect low-income members of our community. We believe in workplace democracy, that the climate crisis is existential, that housing scarcity is a pressing and often manufactured moral failing of our time. And we believe that systemic racism does incalculable harm to our community. We release written pieces weekly. We record a podcast. We're on social media. Our handle is our name, Plea for the Fifth, all one word. We're on IG, Facebook, and Twitter. Our cooperative recently launched premium memberships. That's $7 a month to expand our coverage and offer our supporters some extra content. So if you've liked our local coverage since launching and the alternative in the narrative we've provided Islanders, we hope you will consider becoming a premium subscriber. I want to shout out the incredible team at Plea that worked behind the scenes to bring this event to the district tonight. I also want to wish tonight's producer, Danny, a happy birthday and thank him for being with us tonight. And then lastly, before getting to tonight's forum, it's important that we say a land acknowledgement. Plea for the Fifth, we recognize the traditional occupiers of the land on which we are today, commonly referred to as the Munsee Lenape. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and any Indigenous elders of other communities who may be tuning in tonight. And we stand in solidarity with their struggle towards decolonization and land back. And so, with that said, we'd like to get into the agenda. And hi, Aidan, thanks for joining us. So the New York City primary is Tuesday, June 22nd. And with the crowded field, we are looking forward to a spectrum of views tonight. This year, New Yorkers can rank choice their vote, meaning you can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. So your first choice candidate can be written first and your second choice next and so on, right? And New York City council members, they play an important role in local governance, but the scope of their powers are not always understood. The city council member, once he, she, they are elected, will be able to weigh in on local land development and the allocation of the city's budget and services, from schools to parks, from Rikers Island to the NYPD. And because of the unique responsibilities of the city council, there are issues we aren't delving into tonight, like immigration, universal health care, or taxation of the wealthy. Not because they are unimportant, but because they are outside of city councilors' responsibilities. Many in New York City, including other elected officials, seldom visit New York City. And so the winning candidate in many instances will be who Democratic officials consult with to understand Staten Island, right? So the current council member, Debbie Rose, was the first African-American to represent Staten Island in elected office. She is term limited and unable to run for re-election. And council members are now limited to 2 4-year terms. And we're glad to see the size of the race in the district, and the many folks who'd like to step up to advocate for the North Shore and the city council. But also because of the size of our panel tonight, I just need to emphasize we'll ask for succinct responses. We ask the candidates to provide a brief background of themselves and their campaign, and you will find backgrounds on 6 of the 9 candidates with us tonight on our website, pleaforthefifth.com. So though we will give the candidates an opportunity for closing remarks, I will just briefly introduce our candidates. With us tonight is Amoy Barnes, the Staten Island Director of the Education, Transition, and College Access Center at the New York City Department of Education. Hi, Amoy. Selina Gray, former campaign manager to our incumbent city councilwoman, Debbie Rose. Hi, Selina. John McBeth, deacon at St. Philip's Baptist Church. Hi, John. Troy McGhie, teacher and basketball coach. Hi, Troy. Ranti Ogunleye, director of the Gerard Carter Cornerstone of Staten Island's JCC. Hi, Ranti. Kelvin Richards, public defender at the Legal Aid Society. Hi, Kelvin. Aidan Rivera, a shift supervisor at G4S International Employment Services. Hi, Aidan, welcome. And Michael Schnall, Vice President of Government Relations and Community Investment at New York Roadrunners. Hi, Michael, welcome. So we welcome the 9 of you and thank you for your time tonight. We will ask the candidates to respond in alphabetical order of last name. And then the first to respond will rotate in alphabetical order. So for instance, on our first question, we will invite Amoy Barnes to respond first, then Selina Gray. And then on our second question, we'll invite Selina Gray to answer first, while Amoy Barnes will then go to the end of the queue after Michael Schnall, and so on. So for each question, I'll identify the next to respond among our panelists in case our panelists lose track or the viewers at home lose track. So with that said, let's get right into it. For this first section, we will ask a question and each of you will have an opportunity to respond. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer, and our producer will provide a 10-second warning. So at that point, if you would please wrap up your thoughts at the time warning, and our producers will mute you if you did not make space for others in a timely period. So our first question, I'll just provide a little context first. The development of a BJ's wholesale store and gas station at the Graniteville wetlands is currently a hot button issue. Despite concerns from the community, the development was supported by Debbie Rose, who called concerns from environmentalists, quote, scare tactics, and passed by the city council in a 45-1 vote in 2017. In 2021, Staten Islanders are still pushing back against the destruction of this ecologically sensitive site. The Save Graniteville Wetlands March is just 5 days from now on Saturday, April 24th at noon, and it aims to raise further awareness for the cause. The Coalition for Wetlands and Forests is currently suing the State Department of Environmental Conservation. The Graniteville project, though, is just one example of concerns regarding overdevelopment, gentrification, industrialization, and corporatization of the North Shore. The North Shore, which does not receive the same kind of funding for preserving green spaces as the South Shore, and is also blacker and browner than our South Shore, and is more at risk to dangerous effects of climate change. Our question is, given our nickname as the Borough of Parks, why is climate change one of the most dire existential crises we face, and the environment not a core issue in many of your campaigns? And if we're mistaken on its omission, what is the most urgent item in your campaign that addresses climate change? And we invite Amoy Barnes to answer first.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much to Plea and my fellow candidates for having me today, and for all those who are watching. One of the things that I always like to say is that everything is connected. Nothing lives in a silo. So when my platform talks about transportation, we're talking about climate change. Because if we're able to get people out of their cars and put people in public transportation, that makes our climate better. When we're talking about housing, we're talking about climate change. Because if we're able to put people in good, sustainable, affordable housing and making sure that housing is built sustainably, that is climate change and that is successful. When we're talking about education and we're talking about making sure all schools or community schools, we're talking about keeping our communities healthy. We're talking about better lifestyles, better living, even turning our schoolyards into green markets on the weekend. That's climate change because we're keeping people healthy and we're making sure that people have access to good food and fixing the food insecurity issue. When we're talking about access to public spaces, we're talking about climate change. So one thing that I always say is that there is nothing on my platform that does not include climate change, because it all works together. And when we really look to facilitate and fix all these issues, it improves our climate situation. One of the things I say all the time is when you look at our waterfront and how inaccessible it is, it looks like Sandy hit it just yesterday. Really, what we should make sure that we do is understand that everything is connected to climate change. And when we improve all these issues, we work to improve our climate issue.
Thank you, Amoy. Selina, invite you to go next.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Climate change has been a major part of my platform. I'm part of the New York State Nurses Association, so I will be participating in that march along with the New York State Nurses Association and with Citizens Action, because I am a member of Citizens Action here in Staten Island. So that is part of my platform. So when we talk about green spaces, when we talk about overdevelopment of Staten Island, we need to look at it holistically and also the big picture. Zoning is a big issue here. We can't continue to piecemeal zoning when it comes to a project. We need a city council member, a borough president, and everybody to get involved, community board to get involved with rezoning. That is how we will address the overdevelopment of Staten Island. When we talk about historical districts, we need to rezone those districts to be historic. That will defeat a lot of the development that goes on. When I look out my window, I live on Lake Avenue. I look on Houseman, I have a big storage unit going up. There's 4 of them going up in a 2-mile radius of each other on Richmond Terrace. I don't really hear anybody talking about that. Why are we not addressing that? That is going up in Black and brown communities, all the way from Elm Park to St. George. That is a problem. Do we need 4 storage units? I don't think so. And they're right on our waterfront. That could be a space for affordable housing. So I am addressing climate and actually development in my platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Selina. John McBeth, we invite you to go next.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Climate change, of course, is important to all Staten Islanders. This project in particular has been on my radar since well before 2017, when it was first introduced. And when the developer specifically sued the state for access to buffer zones of those isolated wetlands, it did create a circumstance under which people had some minor misunderstanding about what was actually going on. That said, one of the things that I'm specifically looking forward to changing is I want to be more proactive. One of the things that came up in this discussion regarding these particular wetlands, as well as other projects and development around Staten Island, is we tend to be the last ones as the people on the ground to know about what's going on. And it just simply shouldn't be that way. I don't know who knows first, but I know who will know second, and that is the constituents in my district if I'm elected city council person. Climate change is obviously important. We have the highest rates of asthma. We have high rates of cancer from the pollution coming over from Jersey. Every tree is going to matter to us, and it's vitally important that we do our best to save every single one of them as much as humanly possible. So I too will be at that march, representing myself, of course, as well as making sure that we continue to be the borough of parks and a safe place for kids to play, and where oxygen exchange between trees and humans can continue unabated and actually better. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Troy, we invite you to go next.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to Plead the Fifth for putting this forum together and having us be able to share our views. So you touch on a very important point, climate change. And like Amoy says, everything is climate change. And on my platform, I specifically talk about education and preparing our students for the jobs that are going to be there in the future. And the jobs that are going to be there in the future are clean air jobs. We need to be able to bring these clean air energy jobs to the forefront so that we can have an impact on climate change. We also need to put in legislation that makes sure that we protect our future generations and make sure that we have sustainable living environments for our kids. But with that being said, I want to touch on the BJs. We're in a totally different time and space right now with COVID-19 than we were back in 2017. And with that being said, I see no reason at all why a big box store needs to be developed and put into that space when we need to be taking care of our small businesses and making sure that our small mom and pops get back on their feet. Think about it. Anything you can get at BJ's, a lot of people can get online right now. There's no need for a big box store to be going into those wetlands. So we need to really take a deep dive and look into the necessity of a BJ's going in on those wetlands. And developers, here's my thought. For every tree that comes out, you need to, and I will make sure that you're planting 2 or more for every one you take out.
Thank you, Troy. Ranti? Ranti, we invite you to go next.
Sorry about that. When I think about my platform and climate change, I think it's something that's near and dear to me. I was transformed from a trip to Vienna, Austria, that was focused on sustainability. And I tell this story all the time. I didn't even know how to spell the word. And that was a key moment in my life because I realized it was up to me to look at the word as a global citizen and use the lens of human rights to take action. And if you look at my platform and everything that I've done, I've started a BU university where students can learn about how the bees affect the environment and our ecosystem. So we can begin to educate young people to have healthy understandings of the environment and how they actually are connected to the environment. Because if you teach them young, then you won't need to have all these situations where you have to get community members to understand how important the climate change is, because it was something that will be ingrained into them from young. So this is why we need someone like me who has been posed and to educate young people about the environment. In terms of the BJ and the fighting against this, it's also about leadership having the foresight to understand that community members were screaming for other things. They weren't screaming just for jobs, right? I understand that was important, but understanding how sustainability works, we need to make sure that our community is structured so our children's children can have a better access to resources. Having a BJ is just short term. We're not thinking about the long-term effects of the environment. I'm not just going to be participating in those BJ marches. I'm one of the actual organizers. And this is what I've done all my community work, involving the community involving the community, getting people to understand how important their role is into climate change, and then acting through not only policy, but bringing the community together, because we know that the community is best positioned to solve their own issues. We just need to give them the resources to do so.
Thank you, Ranti. Kelvin, we invite you to go next.
Thank you to the fifth for having us. Thank you, my fellow colleagues. Yes, listen, climate change is very important. I think we need to expand and protect our wetlands, our open spaces, and it's something that is very dear and near to me. I think we need to educate our people about renewable uses and so forth. But when it comes to the BJs, again, it's something that we have to actually have community involvement. You know, I'm someone that if a developer is going to come on the North Shore and make a proposal, I'm going to first have community involvement. I understand the BJ might bring few jobs, but again, it's not just about the BJs. It's about how can you protect and expand our wetlands and our green spaces on the North Shore. So addressing the issues that have to do with overdevelopment, because you actually say, how can we tackle overdevelopment on North Shore? Is a holistic approach. You have to consider the transportation system on North Shore, because if you have overdevelopment, it's going to filter into transportation. You have to address housing, affordable housing, and so forth. That's going to also factor into. So there's a lot of things we could do on the North Shore to actually help the climate, but it's also going to help with traffic. It's going to help with congestion, and it's going to help with our mental health and our physical health. So my platform actually addresses climate change in a holistic approach. It's not just in isolation, and it's something that I'm willing to tackle.
Thank you, Kelvin. Aidan, we invite you to go next.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. And thank you for everyone that's here right now. I really just want to take a moment to say that I'm really proud that personally, one of the main things that I mentioned on my website from the beginning of my campaign has been the environment and how much it matters. I think back to my past and how growing up as a little kid, I would spend time at the Greenbelt and High Rock Park as a young naturalist and just learn about how nature and everything is interconnected. And then during high school, for a couple of years, I worked with my hands maintaining the land at Serpentine Art and Nature Commons, right by Park Hill. And it really just gave me a better appreciation for, like you said, the fact that we are the borough of parks. And that is a sense of pride that we should take, and that there's something that we should preserve, and that is our green space. Because once it's gone, we don't get it back. And there's something very valuable specifically about the wetlands, which is somewhere that development, it does not need to be built. If you look at the safety around it, the fact that the surrounding area will be flooded if there is any heavy rains, if there is anything close to what we experienced with Hurricane Sandy, and we know how bad things like that could be. You think about the health benefits that we're losing, the clean air, the air quality, somewhere for the youth to enjoy, somewhere for all of us to enjoy, especially during COVID. And if people care so much about money, you have to realize the bottom line that also impacts that area and that community. There's food deserts that aren't addressed, but we have a BJ's being dropped there. The fact that the gas station, which will be connected to it, conflicts with other gas stations that are already in the neighborhood, and those aspects which have not been considered, and I personally would consider. So thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael, would you close this out?
Hi, thanks for having us. I really appreciate it. Great to see all my colleagues here. So as a former New York City parkie, green flows through my blood. So trees, I'm a proud tree hugger. What I will say on the wetland issue, Protectors of Pine Oaks Woods is the oldest environmental group on Staten Island. Between them and New York State DEC, many years ago, they stopped the developer from building what Selina was talking about, those large empty warehouses there. And they stipulated the 10 acres of protected wetland that was not part of the as of right development. So I would encourage everyone to go back and talk to Protectors of Pine Oak Woods, read the research that they did, and they're actually going to probably come out with a statement at some point reinforcing the work that was done there. But I will also say that that wetland project is a canary in the coal mine, and we should be very careful that we're focused just on that one and not on everything else that's coming down the pike. I had involvement with protecting Reed's Basket Willow Swamp Park and sued a homeowner who encroached upon that property and got the city to get mitigated damages from that homeowner. I've also worked with encroachment on parkland, and I've also worked on increasing our tree canopy. And I'll say that we need to look at what's out there and what the potential next wave of encroachments are, the deforestation issues, and all the other things coming down the pike. One last thing I want to mention, Troy had mentioned trees coming down. I drafted and got passed and signed into law by Mayor Bloomberg, Local Law 3 of 2010, which dictates the how trees are removed on city parkland and the steep fines and costs involved with those tree removals. Unfortunately, on this property, I believe because it's private, there's less of a steep a penalty for tree removal. So I would encourage and work with the next group of council members to draft legislation to improve our protections on private trees. Thank
you, Michael, and thank you to all the candidates. So our next question. Historically, economic development projects in New York City have frequently left out or inadequately employed vulnerable populations, such as LGBTQ+ individuals, Black and Brown folk, women, and individuals with disabilities. Youth Wins, the coalition of Staten Island youth workforce development organizations, recommends that we increase funding for bridge programming, which helps young people develop the essential skills and acquire the credentials that they need to successfully transition into a career with a family sustaining wage. Plea has previously reported on cuts to the Learning to Work and Summer Youth Employment Program and the impact it has on future job development for the next generation of students. Our question: what will you do in terms of funding and to improve the system which lacks a centralized department for workforce development? And Selina Gray, we invite you to respond first.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've always spoke about, and since I love the unions and I've worked for one, was the lack of jobs available to our Black and Brown students, because everyone is not college bound. A lot of them want to go into the workforce, but they need jobs with a living wage, a prevailing wage even, and also with benefits, so they can actually move out of my house because I have a daughter that, thank God, she moved out, but a real prevailing wage job. I think that if, like, we have ROTC in our high schools, why can't we have the unions come in and bring those type of programs? And they do it, but not on a larger scale. And one of the things that I do support and I do advocate for is that our unions come in and teach our children's trades. If it's the iron workers, if it's even welding, those type of jobs where they can really make prevailing wages, because there's not enough of our Black and Brown children afforded those opportunities to get into those really good prevailing wage jobs. So I would actually put funding into the Board of Education to actually do those collaborative type partnerships, to expand on it, because it is done, but not on a large scale. That is my vision.
Thank you, Selina. John, we invite you to respond next.
Sure, thank you. In my initial campaign announcement, one of the things I specifically mentioned was a return of vocational schooling and vocational programs here on Staten Island. As a product of a vocational school, I was, when McGhie was both a vocational and technical school, I actually had the opportunity to experience both sides, both the vocational side in printing and the technical side in architectural drafting. And the benefit is obvious, right? We'll produce a workforce that is almost ready to hit the ground running. Yes, we can get some cooperation from nearby businesses and unions. It was a program that I actually started with my supervisor way back in 2004, where we started to try and launch a program where we would take high school students directly out of McGhie, obviously, but that we could take them directly out of McGhie and give them the sufficient skills that they would need to enter the workforce at a wage that wasn't a minimum wage, that it was a sustainable wage that the unions currently enjoy over there at Davis Avenue. One of the other things, one of the more important things, is that bringing back vocational schools will also give me the opportunity to allow adults to retrain for new types of careers in case their sector dies.
Thank you, John. Troy, we invite you to respond next.
Thank you. Well, as an educator, I can speak very heavily to this point. And what we need to do is create partnerships with businesses, partnership with leaders in the community, partnerships with different unions, and partnerships like the ones that we had when the old co-op program was in the schools. So vision a future where we could have students do 1 week on the job as an apprentice, be it in construction, be it in a law firm, be it in a hospital, even be it as a teacher. and another week in the school learning. And then at that week that they're out getting hands-on skills, they could be learning remotely or asynchronously. So they would still be keeping up with their studies, but they would be out there getting living life skills on the job in an area that they had an interest in. You could have someone working on soundboards and being in music. You could have someone out learning how to be an electrician. You could have someone going through the process, learning how to become a teacher, and have our Black and brown students get a leg up and move into getting living wages so that when they get out of school or when they get out of college, they already have the skill set that they need to go further in life and not be on the sidelines watching. So I think that it's very, very important, and I would promote and I would have a coalition in the council to bring back the partnership model or the co-op model in this day and age so that students would be able to, one, have a week where they could be working and getting on the job skills, and B, be asynchronous and still learning, and then have that other week where they're in school and getting in-person instruction. That would be my plan.
Thank you, Troy. Ranti, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think when you think about education, it's about reimagining what education looks like. I was transformed from an opportunity outside the classroom. So what happens outside the classroom has to apply to what happens in the classroom. My transformation process happened through travel. Someone's transformation process might be come through a carpenter apprentice program. So we need to already strengthen the programs that already exist. There are NYSHA to tech programs that exist. We need to make sure that the city is allocating enough funding so that it can be more comprehensive and more young people can access it. We're talking about our most vulnerable community members. I think about my role as the director of the Gerard Carter Center. I work hand in hand with Jobs Plus and the NYSHA Tech programs, these training programs that will not just give kids a job, but will actually give them a career and increase their chances for upward mobility. That's what we're actually talking about. And we need a city council member who's going to fight at every level. What we have here is a lot of people who, are close to the seat. So what happens is it's from a top-down model. You need someone who actually understands and has a pulse to what's actually really going on. Again, my B program is a prime example of the innovation that you're going to need to inspire young people. Young people learn in different facets, but we have to be creative. And it starts with not just talking about it, it starts with actually doing it. So you see my B program is one thing. We think about the vocational programs as well, but there are already programs like NYSHA Tech programs and other things. Also, we need to incentivize businesses that do businesses with training programs that hire from NYSHA. Right? This is how you actually make it work for the community members. Get NYSHA involved, but say, hey, you know what? We can work within the community. Let's also get these community-based organizations involved because they're the ones that are actually filling those gaps that the government hasn't. This is how you increase the availability for for our young people to move upward while and reimagining what education looks like.
Thank you, Ranti. Kelvin, we invite you to go next.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for me, this issue is very critical because I have a lot of clients, young people, 16, 17, 18-year-old young people in the criminal justice system that part of their parole or probation, they have to have to work. And I always refer them to the workforce. And again, we have to increase the resources and the funding so these young people have access. But I agree with my colleagues. Everybody's not built, to go to law school or medical school. Some people are just built to just have a vocational education. And I think it's something that I support and I want to actually expand. I'm a fan of Curtis High School, where you have young people in Curtis High School who actually get that LPN license to be nurses while they're in high school. Think about it. You could go to Curtis High School, as you graduated from high school, you could already be a nurse. I mean, you're not a registered nurse, you're a licensed nurse practitioner, you're an LPN. And that actually introduces our young people to jobs, and several careers opportunity at a younger age. And for me, you also spoke about summer youth program. That's very critical. 90% of my young clients normally have contact with our criminal justice system in the summertime. Why? Because we don't have adequate summer programs in the summer to get them involved and engaged. They say an adult mind is the devil's playground. We need to have our young people involved, engaged, and participating in summer programs so they could stay off the streets, so they could have something positive to do and not get involved in the criminal justice system. So for me, it's a whole approach with the summer program and workforce. And I want to actually expand on resources to have these things running. And I'm never going to support a budget cut to our summer programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Aidan, we invite you next.
Hi, thank you. So this is a really great topic, and I'm glad that we're touching upon it because, like you mentioned, there's a lot of marginalized communities and also at-risk populations which aren't going addressed. That includes the youth, LGBTQ community members, non-English speakers, and more. So as a young person myself, I've experienced, and I know friends that have experienced, even if you have a degree, you may have a problem job hunting. So what's important is we have a problem where McGhie is a great technical school and you could learn a vocation and a trade, but we also have to focus on co-op programs where students can learn and work at the same time. They can work part-time and make use of that. We also have to have programs like child care programs so that working class, maybe single mothers could have child care and work at the same time. We need job readiness resources. We need ESL courses for non-English speaking members of the community so that they can get into the job field. And it's mutually beneficial for everyone. So we really just need to invest in the programs that are being defunded or not funded enough. And we need to create programs that we don't have already to address this. And that's what I would hope to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael, I invite you to respond now.
Hi. Well, I'll say first, immediately, during the pandemic and post-pandemic, the city and state has to remove any and all obstacles to rehiring. So if we can't get folks back into the careers that they had and they lost during the pandemic, I think we lose an opportunity to get folks back where they're comfortable. And the folks that cannot get rehired, we need to consider some sort of job retraining programs. One, very similar to some of the other folks are saying, career and technical education programs are key. And I would reintroduce trades programs in the high schools, woodworking, metal shop, auto shop, one of the three most influential things that I had at Susan Wagner High School. And they were gone within a few years after my graduation to make room for more testing rooms for state tests. I think that's horrible. We need to require all local developments to hire local labor. We cannot allow them to escape from those requirements by crying poverty. We need to grow and expand the Grow NYC youth markets, which employ our high school kids to run fresh food markets on street corners in underserved neighborhoods. I think it's a critical learning skill for them to understand how to get a supply chain set up and do their own finances, and it'll put them in a better place post-high school. And two commitments to when I get into the council. One, I will pay my interns. That's a critical, and it makes a huge impression on young people when you pay them for the value that they're giving to you. And two, that council office will support numbers and numbers of nonprofits. Nonprofits make up 20% of the employable workforce in New York City. So I think we need to taxpayer dollars that those nonprofits are employing people at a living wage, and they're doing it in a sustainable way, and they're teaching them critical skills that they can then move from that nonprofit and do other great things for our city.
Thank you, Michael. Amoy, we invite you to close us out.
Thank you. So this is something that's very close to my heart because I work as the Staten Island director of the Transition College Access Center. And my office is specifically tasked with supporting students with IEPs to help them transition from high school to college or career readiness. One of the things that I've seen and that I've learned throughout my tenure in this position is that a lot of times we forget to talk about our vulnerable populations, especially our students with disabilities and our adults with disabilities. They fall through the cracks. A lot of businesses and organizations aren't sure how to sometimes support and work with individuals with disabilities. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there to provide small businesses and businesses with trainings and supports on how to take in and support individuals with disabilities, and also making sure that we're connecting people with the resources and services that already exist in government. A lot of times I always say we need to stop reinventing the wheel. We know what works, we know what's out there, and the role of your elected officials is to connect people with the resources and services that are already out there to the people. So we have Access VR, which has the 54A program that helps individuals with disabilities get a civil service job without taking a civil service exam. There's all these opportunities, and we have yet to really see them prosper the way they can. A lot of times I've also said the civil service test is an amazing opportunity to connect young people and many people, adults as well, into jobs and opportunities. I'm endorsed by DC 37, the largest union here in the city. And all too often, one of the things that I find is a disadvantage is that our young people don't even know how to take civil service exams. So one of the things I would love to do is be able to put those civil service exams in our schools and make them more accessible and allow people to be able to take them as much as possible, adults and students alike. And also looking about our LGBT community, our drop-in centers. Our drop-in centers can be also places for workforce development. At the end of and I also agree with my fellow colleagues, we need to look at more co-op programs. When I went to Curtis High School, a lot of my friends were in the LPN program, but a lot of my friends were in the co-op program. And that is no longer at Curtis High School anymore. I had friends who were working at American Express at 17 years old, and then they got a job straight out of high school. And then also making sure we have access to our apprenticeship programs. Apprenticeship programs are amazing opportunities to introduce our young people into the trades, but also it's a great way to also introduce people into transitional supports and transitional workforce opportunities. So once again, all these things that we've just mentioned already exist or have existed before. We just need to make sure that as City Council, we do the work to connect people to those resources and services, because that's what elected officials are there for. They're the conduit and the liaison to those resources that our taxpaying dollars pay for.
Thank you, Amoy. On to our next question. So in response to gun violence and drug use at Tompkinsville Park, the 120 precinct has recently announced that 2 NYPD officers will be stationed at the park from 7 a.m. until midnight. Given that Eric Garner was killed across from Tompkinsville Park in 2014 because of over-policing and the relationship between the police and Black and brown communities on Staten Island, do you think this is an effective solution? Yes or no? And if elected District 49 City Council representative, how will you work to tackle this issue? And we will start with John McBeth.
So the issue in Tompkinsville Park is not a new issue to Staten Island. As a matter of fact, it's kind of a transplanted issue. Before it was in Tompkinsville Park, it was in another area, and it eventually got pushed out of that area. So utilizing police to push people out of the area, while it seems great on the surface, is not the actual solution. The solution I came up, I actually presented previously to the council member. I've been asking a lot of questions about implementing it and how we can get it implemented here on Staten Island as soon as possible before I come into office. And that solution is to have a high impact mobile drug treatment center that can come to the people, find them where they're at, incentivize them to treatment, utilizing things like vouchers and things of that nature. This program has seen great successes in other areas, and I think it will see a great success here. We cannot just keep pushing this problem around. Secondly, obviously, we can't, as I said many times before, we cannot arrest ourselves out of this situation. The issue with drugs is real. It's going to be with us for quite some time until we decide that we're going to put forth the resources, the time, the energy, and the effort to do the hard work of actually helping people to recover. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Troy, we invite you to respond next.
Yes, the issue that we have at Tompkins Park is an issue that we have in many locations on the North Shore of Staten Island. And I'm going to echo what John just said. We need to get to the underlying root of the issue. Yes, part of it is drug issues, part of it is mental health issues, but we need to be able to treat those issues and give people opportunities to come out on the other side from those issues with jobs, with a better sense of self, with a better mental health than they have now. This pandemic has shown us a lot of things, and mental health issues here on Staten Island is one of them. And I am a big proponent, and one of the issues on my priorities on my campaign is mental health services. And I don't have to tell you, Sean, I don't have to tell anyone on this forum that Staten Island has one of the lowest mental health inpatient services, both for adults and for adolescents in the city. So we need to be able to champion issues like that. And I will do that as our next city council member. I will also give programs that will benefit people with mental health issues and drug addiction. I think that is the underlying root to the issues that we have at that location and many others. And I think that we need to get to the underlying issues and not put a Band-Aid and over police it. Thank you.
Thank you, Troy. Ranti, we invite you to respond next.
Yeah, mental health issues have plagued the North Shore for many years because we have an ill-equipped structure for healthcare. We don't have a healthcare infrastructure. And when we think about prisons, they have become the new mental health facilities. Let's be honest with ourselves. You have 10 times the amount of people that are locked up with mental health issues than in mental health facilities. You know why? Because there's no mental health facilities. That's why there's over policing. When government fails, what do? We call in the police because we know that the structures are failing us. So we compensate, right, these issues by putting the police there. When we know that intervention and prevention is how you actually address what we've been seeing plaguing not just Tompkinsville Park, but right in my catchment area where I work in Stapleton, where community members are suffering. One of my students, Jasir, lost his life. He committed suicide because when we think about wraparound services that don't exist in our communities, this is what exactly happens when we keep getting lip service and not actually what we really need. It's not even a Band-Aid. We know policing has been decimated in communities of color. It's been hypocritical, it's been vicious, and it's not a way that we are going to address the plague that we see in our communities. What we need to do is we need to stop treating addiction and poverty like it's a crime. That's what we need to first stop doing. The way we think about mental health and the way we think about drug addiction, once we begin to change that, now we begin to think about a comprehensive plan. That looks like building up our healthcare infrastructure. This is how we're going to be able to mitigate the issues that we see around mental health, right? So we're not just continue to brutalize these communities that are already been affected by these issues, right? We want to support them, and we support them with real resources and no longer lip service.
Thank you, Ranti. Kelvin, I invite you to respond next.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the issue at the park is more of a mental health issue than a police issue. You know, you cannot arrest everybody and put them and lock them up in Rikers Island. Even if you arrested someone for possession, it's a misdemeanor. The maximum you're doing a misdemeanor is a year. You do 2/3 of the time, you do 8 months. So what we have to address is the core issue, the crux of the issue, which is mental health and substance abuse. Once you address mental health and substance abuse, then you will get to the core of the issue. Again, I have a lot of clients who frequent the park. We have a lot of homeless people at the park. We also have to address housing issues, permanent housing. We have to address the shelter, housing, and mental health and substance abuse. Again, we need resources. A lot of my clients that I represent in criminal court that have mental health issues or substance abuse issues, I have to actually send them to Manhattan to find beds. For instance, I took a plea a few weeks ago, and my client needed some kind of mental health and substance abuse counseling. there wasn't a bed available here on Staten Island. I had to get my social worker to transport that person to Manhattan in the program there. I think we need to invest more here on Staten Island to address this issue, because the issue is not just people at the park in the summertime on the benches using drugs and so forth. You want to reduce the amount of exposure that these people have with the police. We understand sometimes things go south when people with mental health issues interact with the police, because the police, they're not well equipped to handle these situations, and it could lead to death. We have cases where in both of us, someone had an episode where NYPD, where the police was involved, and that person ended up dead. So we have to actually address mental health issues and the police, and how the police can actually understand that these people need help. They're victims. And I think it's sad for them to be placed in a position where they will be arrested, exposed to the criminal justice system, and then put in jail. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Aidan, I invite you to respond next.
Hi, thank you so much. These two issues are something that's really near and dear to me, both gun violence and police use of force. I was a victim of gun violence at only 15 on the way home from Curtis High School, sitting at a bus stop. I was shot. And that really gave me a different point of view on this issue. I'm lucky enough and blessed that I'm here today. A lot of people aren't. And all too often you see people who are my peers, my age, being shot and killed in senseless acts of gun violence, or you'll see an unintended target getting shot just on a street somewhere. And immediately after that happened to me, I worked with Debbie Rose then on 2 initiatives to combat violence in general and gun violence. And then when I went to college and I studied criminal justice at Pace University, one of my favorite topics to study was community policing and how police can interact better with the public and the communities that they're supposed to serve, protect, and serve. And then afterwards, I interned shortly at the United Nations with a non-governmental organization called the International Action Network on Small Arms. And that gave me a perspective because I worked with small local groups from across the world to create a network that they could then use to communicate on ways to combat gun violence in their communities. And we need to do that by acting proactively, not reactively, which the solution that the police are using right now is great to solve gun violence in that one park at those hours. But what happens down the street, or when that police presence ends? It's what you get when you react to a symptom, but not the root cause. And we need to address that. And we need to address that with not over policing, not facial recognition programs. We need to address that with community-led programs and people interactions. So that's how I would face that. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael?
It's a case of whack-a-mole. I mean, you're moving people from one park to another park to another park. It's not addressing the root causes like many of my colleagues have said. When I was the chief of staff for New York City Parks, when Eric Gardner was murdered, we met with NYPD to talk about having a greater police presence in the park during the day to sort of manage what was going on, to figure out who the people were that kept going back and committing the sort of the criminal acts in the park. They refused to get involved. And many years later, I'm happy to say that that Commanding Officer Kinsella has allocated police officers, but not just police officers in a vehicle. They're actually walking the park and walking the neighborhood. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of the perceptions of the neighborhood to those police officers. They get to know who they are. They get to see them from outside of their vehicle. And I think it'll go a long way. But like many of my colleagues have said, the homeless situation in the area, it's unabated, and actually Mayor de Blasio is probably piling on way more than the neighborhood can handle at this point. Those folks are walking the neighborhood with no programs to go to, no job training, no permanent home placement, nothing. What I've done, and when I lived there, I lived on St. Paul's Avenue for 14 years, started the Tompkinsville Restoration Project with my neighbors. We brought positive programming to parks. We partnered with Everything Goes to bring St. George Day to the park. We did holiday lighting events. We did other holiday events, and we worked with the local businesses. And it's always true, and every parkie will tell you that positive experiences in parks brings positive people and pushes out the negative. So I would encourage the Staten Island Urban Center and others to continue to do the things they're doing to bring back a more positive perception of Tompkinsville Park and work to start programming so that our homeless population can find things during the day to do that are helpful to them to reintegrate into our society.
Thank you, Michael. Amoy, I invite you to respond next.
So unfortunately, what we see in Tompkinsville Park is various issues, mental health issues, housing, a violence crisis. We really are dealing with a crisis in our community that requires the need for more social workers, the need for more drop-in centers, the need for more supportive housing, the need for more social workers, the need for more workforce development. All these resources and services, we have to make sure we're connecting them to the people that need them, but we're providing a space, a safe space to connect those individuals with the resources. A lot of times, those individuals are leaving the drop-in homeless shelter that is up the block, and they're congregating in that park because they have nowhere to go, because they don't know where to get services and resources. I cannot stress this enough. We have those services and resources. We know where those services and resources come from. We need to make sure that those services and resources are in our community. We need to make sure that we give those individuals who need those services and resources. And all too often, I cannot stress this enough, and I will keep on saying this, government is supposed to be the entity that is connecting those who are most disenfranchised in our community to those resources and services. I cannot stress this enough. So at the end of the day, we know how to fix these problems. We do. We know how to fix them. We just need to fund them accordingly. And that is what your elected officials and city council members are supposed to do. And that is what I want to go to city council and do, is to fight to make sure we get the appropriate funding, especially here on the North Shore that has consistently disproportionately dealt with a lot of these issues, especially in Black and Brown communities.
Thank you, Amoy. Selina, we invite you to close us out.
Thank you. So what we see in Tompkinsville Park, the homeless issue, the mental health issues, and we do know that we don't have enough inpatient mental health beds here in Staten Island. We talk about resources, the resources are not here, nor do we have the funding. We know that the city has a deficit. We also know that the state has a deficit. And how do we make up that deficit? One of the things that I know we can do is reallocate money from the NYPD. Putting 2 police officers in the park is not going to solve the issue. We actually need social workers in those parks. We actually have a great program like True to Life. We can partner with organizations like that. They can go in there and speak to the people in the park to provide those mental health resources and support services, because we don't have the services here. And the way we can get that is reallocating money, get more social services. They want to put another 100-room men's shelter here. Do we need that shelter there? And not that I say we can't provide shelter for homeless people, but where's the transitional housing? Where's the permanent housing? We're placing more homeless people in an area was already struggling for social services. So until we can combat that issue in our own community, we can't take on any more. It's like a wet paper towel and you're putting bricks on top of it, it's gonna break. We need to find the money, allocate it to the proper resources. Yes, 2 police officers, but supportive services are more important. We need social workers in those parks. We need organizations like True to Life to partner with the police officers and make sure that we have those actual services there for people in need, and not more homeless shelters in our communities, because that's not what's needed right now. We need to help our residents that are living here, that are struggling. That's what we need to do. And that's what I'll do as your next city councilwoman.
Thank you, Selina. Okay, so we are going to shift gears and head into our second part. We call this our quick fire section. We'll provide some, again, brief context on an issue. We'll pose a yes or no question. And rather than provide each candidate a chance to respond, we'll just ask that all candidates raise, let's say, a thumb for yes, if you're in agreement, or perhaps cross your arms, or maybe a thumbs down if you're in disagreement. Then we'll check in with we'll poll our audience and check in with them to see where they stand on the same issue. We'll do a couple of these quickly, and then we will transition to community submitted questions. So our first, in late 2018 on Staten Island, the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union attempted to unionize Amazon warehouse workers, but the effort petered out. In March of 2020, Amazon infamously fired an assistant manager on Staten Island named Chris Smalls for organizing fellow employees around their inattention to COVID-19 protocols. In the summer of 2020, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust took historic action with its investigation of competition in digital markets and identified Amazon as a powerful predatory monopoly. Just last month, the National Labor Relations Board conducted an election for Amazon employees in Bessemer, Alabama, on whether to unionize, and that ultimately failed. Today, Amazon is among this borough's largest employers with 3 fulfillment centers. Our first question is, do you believe in workplace democracy and that the unionization of workers at the Amazon fulfillment centers here on Staten Island would have a net benefit to the island? Once again, our first question is, do you believe in workplace democracy and that the unionization of workers at the Amazon fulfillment center here on Staten Island would have a net benefit to the island? And okay, great. I think I saw everybody's. I will briefly just activate the poll for our audience to chime in. If you wouldn't mind, just give folks a moment. Just allow 5 more seconds. Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, accidentally muted myself. Apologies. Our next question. The City Council is on the brink of recognizing a new union for staff workers of City Council members. Once recognized, the Association of Legislative Employees will be America's largest legislative staff union. Our question, if your campaign staffers were to unite, would you consider their right to collectively bargain in a union? Okay, that was fast. Great, let's hand that over to our audience. Just give me one moment. Nope, that was the same question. Sorry, 1 second. Folks can vote now. Just allow a little bit of time for people to respond. So our community is very generous, though they're not campaigning. They're in agreement with many of our candidates here. Great. Our next question. A little bit of a context here. A nationwide study published by the ACLU in 2019 stated that there is, quote, no evidence that police and schools improve school safety, unquote, and that students with disabilities and Black students were arrested at a rate 3 times that of white students and students without disabilities. Many scholars and activists argue that school safety agents are a major contributor to the school to prison pipeline. New York City's 2019 Department of Education records show that Black students were restrained by school safety agents more than any other race in 3 of 4 of Staten Island's NYPD precincts. Data also shows that New York City schools have twice as many school safety agents as they do school counselors. Our question is, do you support reallocating Department of Education school safety agent funding for counseling services for students? Okay, I'm gonna hand it to our audience for a moment. Our audience can now vote. About 5 more seconds. Okay, and our final quick fire. When Bailey Seton Hospital closed, North Shore residents lost access to a medical hub. The COVID-19 pandemic has further increased the need for medical services, especially for Black and Latinx Staten Islanders who have reported higher mortality rates from the virus. Private hospitals like the Richmond University Medical Center are overwhelmed. The hospital's emergency room was built to serve around 25,000 people, but has 60,000 to 65,000 patients annually. Staten Island is currently the only borough without a public hospital. So our question is, will you support a public hospital on Staten Island? Okay, great. I'm going to hand it to our audience. I have about 15 seconds to vote. Okay, great. Thanks for indulging us on that. So for this final section, we go to our audience for what they'd like to ask. My Plea team members have been collecting questions submitted by our audience throughout the forum. We've also, in the lead up to the event this evening, done some social media campaigns where we've encouraged community members to submit questions to us in advance. So similar to our first section, each candidate will have an opportunity to respond. But in this section, we'll ask that candidates limit themselves to about a minute, and our producer will keep us honest. I'll go to, so our first question is, on Staten Island, there are over 10 theater companies, yet there exists no affordable venues for smaller presentations, for smaller audiences than the St. George Theater, CSI, or SNUG can accommodate. Given that New York City is virtually the theater capital of the United States, why aren't there more performance venues in the borough? How would you address this on Staten Island? And we will start with John McBeth.
So we're going on different terms. But anyway, listen, the arts are vitally important to the well-being of the citizenry, of everybody who lives here on Staten Island, and it's vitally important that we continue to fund the arts as much as humanly possible through city programs and grants and things of that nature. Snug Harbor is building an expansion to their theater, which is going to be a boon. And there are other spaces in Snug Harbor that should be easily convertible to open theater space or usable theater space. That said, we would encourage the arts to expand as much as they would want to, as much as they could provide capacity for. And we would also encourage some of those high-end venues to offer space at a discount to those smaller theater companies, and to give them an opportunity for some of the off time to provide theater. Not to mention, with all of the versatile uses coming to the ballpark, I could easily see putting up a band shell, a theater stage, and having that be a venue as well for a reuse or repurposing of the park.
Thank you, John. We'll hand it to Troy to respond next.
So the arts and culturals are close to my heart, and I'll tell you why. My son is an actor, and I've throughout his career, be it middle school, high school, college, he went to NYU for performing arts. I've sat in those seats and been in the small theaters and wondered why there weren't better venues. So here's my plan. And my platform calls for the North Shore of Staten Island to have a sports and entertainment complex right on our waterfront. So where they were going to put up that wheel that may never go up, we could have sports venues, soccer fields, football fields, an indoor pool that New York City has been promising us for years can go right on that location, along with a state-of-the-art theater that all of our theater companies in the wings, Harbor Lights had to close down because they were not getting enough following. There were no venues that they could rent out to put on performances. We could have a city-owned, city-financed, and get partners to come in and have that right on our waterfront. Make our waterfront a destination so that now people are coming there and spending money. Because guess what? When you come to a performance, you go out to dinner, and we could now put our revenue into our economy in the North Shore, right down by the waterfront.
Thank you, Troy. Ranti, we invite you to respond next.
Yeah, I think this goes with everything that I've been saying in terms of how we reimagine leadership and how we reimagine education, how we reimagine this infrastructure to provide these spaces for arts initiatives and arts program. We also need to make sure that we're eliciting community voice. We're talking about not enough spaces in our community. So I don't just think providing one state of the art art center is going to actually be the end all. We need to be creative on how we do this. We need to look at organizations, nonprofit organizations like Central Family Life Center that has a stage. How can we actually incentivize them and actually give them more resources so they can actually build in a theater program? How can you work with nonprofits like the JCC that has a big stage at the Gerard Carter Center? Things that are already there that we can actually now reimagine through the pandemic. We see that we can actually bend and use these resources to actually outfit things that are already there. We need to make it more accessible. Just having one big art state of the art at the ferry is not going to make it more accessible for community members. I was actually talking to one of my community members.
Thoughts, please.
I was actually talking to one of the community members who really is an artist in terms of spaces. He said it should be the government that's actually incentivizing these businesses to support these art spaces. So we need to get the community involved, but we also need to think about.
Thank you, Ranti. Kelvin, we invite you to respond next.
Yes, I mean, I do agree with my colleagues. I think art and culture is very important. I think we need to support and expand art on the North Shore. We have to actually provide the resources to our young people that are in college and in high school. We have to encourage them to actually participate. But again, you talk about spacing and spaces. I do agree. You know, you have something near the ferry, and not just one location. Like Ranti was saying, we need to actually reimagine how we use all the spaces that are already there to actually improve and make use of it. Because in certain communities, our young people, they're not exposed to performances, music, culture, and so forth. So once we support these organizations that actually promote art and culture, we will actually expand on the art and the culture on the North Shore, and it's something that I'm looking forward to. Once I'm privileged to be your next city council person.
Thank you, Kelvin. Michael, we invite you to respond next.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Aidan. Is Aidan going?
I'm sorry, Aidan, forgive me.
It's all right. Thank you. Well, I was just going to say, on top of what everyone else said, which is already great, we definitely need to, I'm on board with using what we already have, which means the St. George Theater, which is an amazing historical site, which is utilized for a lot. And you mentioned that this is really almost sort of like an entertainment capital of the nation. And it's great that we have Manhattan just a boat ride away. And I believe that with the city council having such close ties to the public school system, we could possibly add additional funding to public school arts programs, which would mean elementary school, middle school, high school, but most importantly, high school, because it's a huge outlet for kids. For a lot of people, it's a reason to go to school. And not just that, but for people that are concerned about money, it could possibly lead to a great career, which is like a booming industry in New York City, whether it be in the arts on stage, which is what we're discussing, but in the arts with any sort of physical medium, and any other type of art, really. So I would just.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael?
Thanks to Sue Fenley for this question. She might be the only one that knows on this group that I married into the Von Trapp family. When I first got married, my in-laws had a Neverland Theater Company, which had many different homes. But what a lot of people don't realize is that running a theater company is very expensive, and there is almost no profit in it. So it is very difficult. And so I would encourage that we don't keep building more theater companies, but we make them sustainable and profitable so they can keep doing what they're doing and doing it well. We have many venues that are, I'm not going to say anything more. We have many venues that exist. I've been to all of them. Some of them are very small, black boxes. Some of them are huge, like the St. George Theater, and everything in between. So we have to encourage adaptive reuse. I will also say that it is an incredible pathway to careers. 15% of the New York City economy is derived from our theater sector. So it is a great place for folks to get a taste of stagecraft, theater craft, building things, acting, and all those things. And the best place to do it in the United States is Wagner College. Their theater program is the #1 theater program in the country, not just because of the teachers there, but because of the proximity to Broadway.
Thank you, Michael. Amoy, we invite you to respond next.
Thank you. So this is also something that's very close to my heart because I learned how to play the cello at IS 27 and continued as a student in Curtis High School and had these amazing experiences playing at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center that I could have never imagined. So our music programs and our art education programs in our schools are extremely important in keeping those funded, but also making sure, and once again, utilizing the resources that we already have and making sure that all our schools are community schools, also make them more accessible to the community, to these different arts institutions. Also using spaces like the amazing Alice Austin House, which I'm a proud board member of, and using all those different art spaces. Also, one of my biggest things, and it's a pet peeve of mine, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. I look at Empire Outlets and I think to myself, how wonderful it would have been if we had some space there that was just for the community, a public use space, that amazing, beautiful waterfront. That is our waterfront. That property is built on public property. And anything that is built on public property, we should make sure that it's used for public use and that there should be accessible space, open public space there that people can utilize.
Thank you, Amoy. We'll hand it to Selina next.
I'm not gonna go into how great of a saxophone player I am, but but the public spaces are very important when it comes to the artists. You know, the artists have been really struggling due to the pandemic. They haven't been able to make money. Our storefronts have been closed because businesses have gone out of, have not been able to rent. So we have to kind of marry those two together, not just our businesses, our community-based organizations, but our storefronts as well, and bring the artists in, not just and incentivize the businesses to actually open those spaces up to our artists so they can get those spaces at a discount, be it a tax cut or however it works out, how the city government can work it out, but we can negotiate that as elected officials to make those spaces affordable to our artists, because right now they don't have the money to pay for those spaces. We need to make it affordable for them, and we can create that avenue where it is affordable for them, and also a cohesive open space, which we don't really have right now. So we need to make sure that all of our open spaces are open to all of our local artists. Oh my God, I said artists. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Selina. It's getting into the evening, so it's okay if we make a misspeak. Our next question from our audience. With recreational cannabis now legalized in New York, what are the candidates' plans to help people get out of jail and have nonviolent possession charges dismissed? And would you support a dispensary in the 49th district? We will start with Troy McGhie.
So that's a great question. I absolutely would support expunging prior arrests for cannabis. And I don't think that one dispensary in the 49th district, I think that there should be multiple. And my reason for saying that is because this industry, I think New York City, the 49th district, communities of color should get in on the ground floor. And I think that we should be able to benefit from something that has historically kept us down and has been a bone in of our Black and Brown members' existence. So I agree. I would promote it. I think that it would be a great revenue source for the 49th district.
Thank you, Troy. We'll hand it to Ranti to respond next.
Yes, I definitely agree with not only recreational use of marijuana. I do agree that it's medicinal purposes. And we do know that this has been one of the ways that communities of color have been targeted. They've been targeted. They've used the laws against marijuana to target our communities. Some communities, actually, the NYPD have invested over $1 million in locking up communities of color, targeting for drug addiction, and specifically marijuana as a way to actually lock up communities. The communities that have been affected the worst should benefit the most, right? So we need to incentivize Black-owned businesses that actually, we need to help them, we need to train them and give them the incentives to open up storefronts, and definitely not just one dispensary, but communities of color should be able to use this as a way to transition from their pain, from what we know over policing has done, but now use this as a way to reinvest into the community. Use this as a way in terms of comprehensive health. Use this as a way for holistic approaches to mental health and drug addiction. There's other ways that we need to think about our community, and this is actually the beginning of how we turn. And then we can also use the funding from the dispensaries to actually, like I said, go back into our communities in terms of education, job readiness, healthcare. There's so many things and benefits.
Thank you, Ranti. I'm handed to Kelvin next.
Yeah, I mean, this issue is very important. I think we need more dispensary on the North Shore. But listen, marijuana possession has been one of the tools that NYPD uses to stop my clients. And that's what they established probable cause with. They said, well, I smell marijuana in your car. But that smell leads them to find something in the car. That smell makes them to actually charge you with resisting arrest. That smell of marijuana makes them to search you. And when they find something else, it goes up. And then guess what? You get arrested, you lose your housing, you lose your job, you lose your relationship. So actually it's been sad for our people. But I need folks to understand that it's going to be automatic. Once you've been charged with possession 1 pound of marijuana or selling 20 grams of marijuana, it's automatic. Your record will be expunged. Once it's above that threshold, once it's above 1 pound or 25 grand, contact me, contact legal aid, contact an attorney, and it's something we're going to work. By law, it shouldn't be on your record. When you go look for a new job, it shouldn't say you've been convicted of marijuana, but it's something we have to work for.
Thank you, Kelvin. Aidan?
Hi, sorry. So I definitely agree with the move to expunge records that have nonviolent drug offenses in general, especially for marijuana-related offenses and crimes. And I believe that the NYPD is already making that move, so I'm glad they are. And it means also making sure that in the future, no one is stopped, no one is hassled or harassed for such a thing as the odor or strong odor of weed. And I definitely agree that we should have at least one dispensary here. If not, New York City ran one, a private business. And like others have said, the communities that have been victimized the most related to marijuana should benefit the most. So I definitely agree with moves that have been made to support minority-owned businesses, having the most small business support from New York State and New York City, as far as the city council could do for that. And I know that I've looked into this. There's at least a year probably until we'll see a private dispensary. We have time to do this. We could set this up far in advance. And that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael, go ahead.
I'm a big fan of the legalization of marijuana. First, because as everyone has said, it has targeted Black and Brown communities exponentially more than anyone else. I am supportive of expunging arrest records. Yes, dispensaries all across the island, not just the North Shore. And in the state law, it requires that folks in Black and Brown communities get first dibs at setting up those dispensaries. So this next council member and their office is going to be critical in working with the state and our city folks to make sure that Staten Island gets the most that we can in terms of those new small businesses. And I'll take it one step further. I think those taxes that will come from the legalization of cannabis should support three things. One, the reintegration of folks who have served time back into our society, job training, housing, etc. Two, drug treatment. And three, CUNY should go to supporting free CUNY. Go back to what it was when my parents went to CUNY. Free, and you're unfettered from student loans, and it will benefit Black and Brown communities who will be able to access free education from pre-K to senior year of college.
Thank you, Michael. Amoy?
So yes, I want to make sure that my office is accessible as possible, and constituent services is the foundation of any elected official's office. And so making sure that constituents understand how to access the resources, the services, or how to expunge their record or access organizations that could assist them, that is always a priority. But also making sure that my office knows how to connect individuals to how to get access to those dispensary license, and also the processing license. Because when we're talking about the legalization of marijuana, there's the dispensary part and there's the processing part. And when we're thinking about the future of the marijuana industry, we want to make sure that, once again, communities that have consistently been disenfranchised by the criminalization of marijuana gets first dibs. And also making sure that we're creating the financing for those supports. Because right now, the amount of money that it costs to actually get a dispensary license is exponential. And the only people who have access to them are people who have access to capital. So how are we making sure that we give minorities, disenfranchised communities access to capital to be able to access the dispensary licenses and the processing licenses, so that we don't consistently fall into another situation where those who have are getting access to the future of marijuana. So in my opinion, yes, all the way to legalization and making sure that my constituents reap the benefits of it.
Thank you, Amoy. Selina, hand it to you.
So when we're talking about expunging records, I would advocate for that, but I also want to mention that our DA has not dismissed misdemeanors yet. You know, those misdemeanor records have not been dismissed, so we also need to address that. And when it comes to actual dispensary, I am in support and advocate for that, because I believe that marijuana could be used for so many other things that can replace, that can deal with a lot of the mental issues that a lot of our young Black and Brown communities suffer right now. So for the medicinal use, for the recreational use, and yes, I do advocate for actually expunging those records. But, you know, we have to work with our legal team, and that would be our DA, who hasn't even dismissed the misdemeanors violations yet. He's the only DA that hasn't done that. So yes, I advocate for expunging and more and dispensaries here in Staten Island. Yes, I do.
Thank you, Selina. John, if you close us out.
Sure. More than a year ago, long before people started thinking about this, the advance of this series of stories on marijuana and the legalization, and as well as what would come of it. And before I answered the question on whether or not it should be legalized, the first thing I made sure to make sure would happen is that people's records would be expunged. So that was, again, more than a year before people started even thinking about a lot of these things. With regard to dispensaries, I agree with all my colleagues. We definitely should have making sure that those who are affected the worst, people know that the usage rates are the same across different races. Whites, blacks use at the same level, but unfortunately, what is proven true is that blacks have suffered more at the hands of enforcement. And so I certainly agree that we should also benefit more coming out of this horrible situation that we've created for ourselves effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So our next question from our audience, I will also drop it in chat here. Can you talk about your specific approach to public capital projects on the North Shore? And we will start with Ranti on this question.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think for community members, they don't have access to the ULURP process. And we need to make the process more accessible. When we think about our historic waterfront, and when we think about building on public land, it's only a few people that make these decisions. And we need to work with developers and community members that are together. And we only need to work with developers that prioritize the needs of the community first. So working with developers that say, you know what, 50% of all buildings that are built in terms of housing are going to be prioritized for community members that live there, using media metrics, not federal benchmarks, right? That's how you actually do that. You don't just you make the process more accessible. How do we start to make the process more accessible? We use the community centers, we use Zoom, we use PTA meetings to make sure that we can elicit community voice. Because when these capital projects happen, what happens is we get community members screaming for healthcare infrastructure, and then we get a mall instead. Right, when community members are not involved in this process, we get a BJ's built on wetlands when we need more sustainable infrastructure. We need to think about how we can make our planning more sustainable for our community members. Right.
Thank you, Ranti. I'm going to hand it to Kelvin next.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when it comes to developers coming on the North Shore, I'm going to have three priorities. First, we need the community involved. We cannot have people build here on projects that doesn't have the community at heart. And also, when they're building, I'm going to hold them reliable to have real affordable housing. And I have a five-point plan. First, I want the AGI to actually be representative of Staten Island, of the North Shore. Second, I want to also create spaces for our homeless folks to secure permanent housing and have a wraparound service for mental health issues and substance abuse issues. Third, I want to increase funding for our NYCHA buildings to help with repairs. Fourth, I want the DA to prosecute landlords that actually harass their tenants. And lastly, I want to expand the right to counsel for tenants who are in housing court, especially after COVID. Once COVID is over, you're going to see evictions skyrocketing, and I need people to have attorneys once they go to housing court. Also, I want the developers to have union jobs. Whatever contract I'm going to agree to, it has to be union friendly, and that's going to be my approach.
Thank you, Kelvin. Aidan, hand it to you.
Hi, thank you. So when we talk about public capital projects, it's important to also note that most public capital projects are infrastructure projects. So that includes public transportation, roads, buildings that could be a public hospital, roads that are in desperate need of repair, public transportation, which means not just what we have, but projects for what we can do. Things like whether that be North Shore Rapid Transit, something like a North Shore Railway, or working with state and federal level local representatives, working with them to fight for things like other ferry alternatives, or maybe a new bike path across the Verrazano Bridge, which a lot of people have been advocating for, things like that. And it also means involving the community and seeing what they want. That way you always have an ear to the people and listen to what they want, and informing people of things like discretionary funds and how they could contribute to the conversation and let you know what they want, because that's most important, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael?
Hey, Sean, before you mute us off, can you play the music like they do in the Oscars, just letting us know we have our 10 seconds? So Aidan has made a really good point. The public projects that we're talking about, like Empire Outlets and the Wheel and River North, are not public projects, they're private projects. For me, I'll just say quickly, public benefits always built first before any pilings go on the ground. They must do their infrastructure projects first before any pilings go on the ground. And before they even come to my council office, they better talk to the community. When I was in the Bloomberg administration, they lobbied heavy to raise the thresholds on the Wicks law, which then allowed the city to bypass the requirements to hire union labor. I would advocate for lowering the threshold and banning the bifurcation and trifurcation of contracts. So the city must hire union labor when working on public property using taxpayer dollars. Two things: when I become council member, I will have clear expectations that before these developers even think to come to Staten Island, so they'll never bring a project again that doesn't make sense. And that I've requested meetings with the River North folks, and I've yet to hear an answer from them. I think that tells you a lot about who they are.
Thank you, Michael. We'll hand it to Amoy.
So thank you so much. I just want to say that when we talk about public projects, public property used for public use, I cannot stress that over and over again. I would like to see us do an assessment of public property and how we can better use public property for public use. We have so many pieces of parcels of land across the North Shore that are underutilized, and we can look at how we can possibly use those open spaces and those opportunities to be better used for the community. Also, just making sure that community members are in the room when decisions are being made. At the end of the day, I don't want to have an office where backroom deals are made and all these things. I want to make sure that community members are in the meetings. I want to make sure that community members are a part of the conversation, a part of the discussion. Because at the end of the day, what is an elected official but a representative of the community? And so to enfranchise, engage, and empower the community, that is the role of an elected official. And that is what I want to do. And so making sure that people are a part of that conversation when public projects are being developed, and educating them on how that process is done. Because a lot of times people don't understand or know how that project is being done. Over and over again, I say this all the time: elected officials work for the people. That is what they do. And they're there to make sure and support and to push projects that the community wants and that people want. So that's what I want to do. And that's, those are and if the public wants it, I want to make sure that it happens.
Thank you, Amoy. Selina, hand it to you.
So I feel that the URLIP process is very important, because that is like the beginning of any project here on Staten Island. And when it comes to capital projects, we need to actually look and see what the environmental impact is, not just the environmental impact, the social impact. Are we gentrifying a community? Those things need to be put in place, and that should start at the beginning. And right now, that doesn't happen in all projects. Community input is very important, because we have to see what the community wants. You have half of the community that doesn't want these Liberty Towers, but we know we don't have affordable housing, but we're going to build shelters. Where's the sense in that? There has to be a happy medium here, but the community does need to have the input. And so it's my commitment, and I will advocate to make sure that the URLIP process and environmental study does include Do we have an infrastructure in place to support those projects? What's the real environmental impact? Are we harming the community, and ensuring that people are at the table when those conversations happen?
Thank you, Selina. We'll hand it to John McBeth.
Yes, definitely with regard to public projects, we definitely want the community on board first. What is somewhat unfortunate is that there have been opportunities in the past for some of these projects for the community to be involved. And I look out across the community board meetings where either whether it's the one that I chair in Port Richmond, Manus Harbor, or the one that the main community board meeting, and only the most interested who are either against the project or the most boisterous. The best community action or reaction to a project I've ever seen was Mount Manresa. They did a great job of putting on sufficient pressure that really turned around that whole project. And so definitely have the community on first. And I agree with Mike Schnall in reference to making sure that infrastructure is done before a single pylon goes into the ground, before anything changes within any type of public project, that to make sure that it has sufficient infrastructure support. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Troy, if you close us out.
Sure, thank you. I agree with a lot of my colleagues on the call tonight. And this comes down to three very simple things for me. First, common sense development. It's got to make sense for us to move forward with a project. Second, and I want to make this perfectly clear, not a shovel goes in the ground until infrastructure is addressed. And we've learned that lesson. Look at Empire Outlets. Anybody drive on Richmond Terrace lately? Those streets were supposed to be part of that whole thing getting taken place. But the streets haven't been worked on because guess what? The wheel never happened. And now the owners of the Empire Outlet don't want to flick the bill for the roads to be repaved. All of that needs to be done before a shovel goes in the ground. And lastly, we got to make sure that our community gets the amenities that they need when we have projects like this, be it a school, be it a community center, be it a area in buildings that go up that have supermarkets in it and places for people to go shopping. So we need to make sure that these things are included in deals and that developers can't back out and say, oh, we don't have enough funding for that to happen. So that needs to be done upfront, and I will do that upfront when I'm a city council member.
Thank you, Troy. So our final question. Plea for the Fifth recently published an article highlighting the issues CSI has faced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in terms of affordability and accessibility. While some of these issues have started during the pandemic, the enrollment at CSI has been decreasing for some time. How would you address the fact that CSI is bleeding Staten Island students specifically? And we will start with Kelvin.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. I graduated from CSI myself in 2008 with a BA in International Relations. I know how it's hard to move around campus, especially for folks that are disabled. And I know how our Black and brown folks that cannot afford or they're not eligible for financial aid cannot go to school. You know, I worked full-time overnight as a home health aide. I worked overnight taking care of a guy who was paralyzed and went to school during the day. So I get it. You know, I understand how most of our students in CSI, they're Black and brown folks because they cannot afford to go to different institutions. So we have to actually invest and give more resources to CUNY. This is not just a CSI issue. I think it's a bigger issue is CUNY. We have to actually stop the bleeding that is happening with CUNY. So it's something that is dear to me because I still stay in contact with CSI. I still stay in contact with my professors, and I know the funding that is needed to put CSI back on track. So it's something that as a city council person, I will advocate for more funding for CUNY.
Thank you, Kelvin. Hand it to Aidan.
Thank you. Well, like others have mentioned, we definitely need to, however we can do it in any way, shape, or form, reallocate funding, raise funding for city universities. They really are the backbone of New York City, if you think about it, especially here on Staten Island. CSI is, and other city universities are often underrated and underappreciated. And you have to get rid of a lot of the stigma around going to a city university for people. They offer great programs, great educations at a low cost. They have Macaulay honors programs, and they're a great resource for the local community. So definitely raise funding, reallocate funding, whatever you can do to help them in any way, because they need it and they deserve it.
Thank you, Aidan. Hand it to Michael.
It's always been my understanding that the most expensive part of a college education is actually the students paying for the capital investment that SUNY and CUNY and every other university has made in bringing Starbucks to campus and all these other things that I never had when I went to college. But CUNY, I think, is suffering from a similar plight. They've made great advancements and investments in their campuses, including the St. George campus and the building and the campus in Willowbrook. I think we need to look at various streams of funding to ultimately make CUNY free, which it was once a long time ago. We need to have a percentage of the marijuana tax allocated to subsidize CUNY. We need to look at the 1% tax that's being talked about on the city and the state level. Some of that money should be allocated to CUNY. And we need to look at other streams of funding that can help subsidize and ultimately make CUNY more affordable and accessible to all. It was and should be, again, sort of the poor man's Harvard. That's what they used to call Brooklyn College back in the 60s and 70s. I think CSI has the potential to be the poor man and middle class's Harvard again, if we can just tamp down those costs, find streams of revenue, and make it accessible.
Thank you, Michael. Amoy.
So half of the attendees at CSI, I believe the article said, makes less than $30,000 a year. I just want to that to me is just right there, shows how important it is to make sure that our education system and our CUNY system is affordable and actually free. I agree 100% with Mike. We should be using the millionaire's tax to make sure that it's supporting CUNY and making CUNY affordable and free. Making sure that people have accessible and good education is essential to changing the lives of some of our most disenfranchised communities, immigrant communities, Black and Brown communities. Our CUNY system is the foundation of building the middle class. And at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of our government to make sure that it stays sustained and maintained. And I'm going to do whatever I can to support legislation and funding to get our program, to get our CUNY system funded and the resources that we need. Because at the end of the day, as a CUNY graduate, I graduated from Baruch with my master's, and I say this all the time, if it wasn't for CUNY, I wouldn't have been able to get my master's because I was able to pay for it out of pocket because it was so inexpensive. But honestly, I would have loved it if it was free.
Thank you, Amoy. Hand it to Selina.
Well, CUNY is facing a whole lot of issues, the system as a whole. They're laying off of adjunct professors at an alarming rate. Children, our kids on the CUNY campuses are suffering from depression, anxiety, food insecurities, and they don't even have the supportive services needed to kind of be healthy, stay on campus, learn, and do what they need to do. So CUNY, yes, needs to be free, but not just that. We need to make sure that we keep our adjunct professors in our CUNY system and to attract quality educators to our system right now, because that's not happening. And the only way we could do that is reallocating funds to ensure that CUNY stays afloat, that our kids get the supportive services they need, because they do not. Kids on these campuses in CUNY that live on these campuses are suffering right now. And we need to also make sure that we find money, not just from a wealth tax, but the marijuana and allocating funds from wherever we need to and readjusting the budget. And I will advocate to ensure that funds do go into CUNY and that we hire really quality educators, not laying them off, because we cannot balance the budgets on the back of our CUNY system, nor Black and Brown people or poor people. We need to make sure that people stay employed and our students have a quality education that they can afford, which is free.
Thank you, Selina. Hand it to John.
So really simple, short-term services, midterm, making sure that we're reallocating funds, and then long-term is the march towards free college for city university students, state university students eventually as well. And that's what I intend to do as far as whatever I can do to support and move those things forward in that specific order.
Thank you, John. And to Troy.
Thank you, Sean. One of the benefits of going towards the end of this is that you get to hear what everyone says. But with that is the downfall that a lot of the things that I was going to say were already said. So I'm going to say I agree with a lot of my colleagues. I agree that the millionaire tax is a way to make CUNY affordable for everyone. I believe that the marijuana tax on that would be a great revenue stream for CUNY. But with that being said, we also have to realize that people need to take an investment into themselves. So I'm not calling for it to be free, but I'm calling for it to be affordable. And people need to invest in themselves so that they can feel that sense of accomplishment and a sense of worth that they invested in themselves and bettered themselves. I have a master's from CSI in education, so I know what that's like. And like Amoy, I paid for it myself. No one helped me out. But I think that if we go through those two revenue streams, that would be a great way to make CUNY affordable for our Black and Brown.
Thank you, Troy. Hand it to Ranti.
I disagree with Troy McGhie. We must return to the tuition-free model that existed up until 1976, when the majority of students became Black and Brown. So we know implicit bias and racism was why CUNY tuition became where students have to pay. It impeded access for communities of color. So we know that we need to reverse what this effect has done. We know that communities of color are the ones struggling the most to actually access education. So we need to reverse that by ensuring CUNY has enough resources and funding to make it affordable and free for all participants. I know what it's like. I was an adjunct professor at the College of Staten Island for over 7 years. And my job was to help first-year students navigate their first-year experience. Because we know that if you help them in their first year, they have a better chance of being successful. But some of my things that I had to address was housing for students, employment for students, resources for students. It took me outside the classroom to actually address the issues community students were facing, so they can actually properly focus on education. So we can't say that we it's just affordable. It's our duty and our job. It's a human right. And our students need access to these resources. We do not need lip service anymore. We've got lip service. We need a CUNY to ensure, and that's why CUNY has endorsed me as their candidate, because they know I'm going to speak truth to power. They know that I know what's going on in these community campuses. And not only do we need a wealth tax, we need a repurpose funding from the NYPD, just like I said earlier, because this is actually how we're going to make CUNY affordable. Restore it back to 1976, not just because communities of color are now having an opportunity to access and upward mobility. We need.
Thank you, Ranti. So want to respect our time. We're getting towards our wrap. I'd like to thank our 8 candidates for joining us tonight. And I want to invite them to each provide closing remarks for our audience. You all will have a minute each. And we will begin with Aidan Rivera.
Hi, could you hear me? Thank you. So thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all for listening and being a part of this. And thank you for hosting this. I'd just like to say, I've had a lot of people ask me, why you? Why are you running? You don't have decades of public experience. You're young. And I just say, personally, I feel as though, because I see myself as an average person with good intentions. And to write that off is to write off much of the North Shore community, because a lot of what makes the community function is average people with good intentions. Those are the people that start groups, organizations, they host events, they fill in where city organizations can't, and they make it happen. And to me, that means personally doing as much as I've been able to do in the past, speaking back to being a victim of gun violence and immediately working with the city council member on initiatives. A couple months after that, Hurricane Sandy happened. I was fortunate enough that I wasn't really affected by it, but I immediately gathered as much supplies as I could from myself, from my neighbors, went to the South Shore and got there before the Red Cross and did what I could to help out with my own hands. And it means then working with IANZA at the UN to combat gun violence internationally. Now, recently, I've become a member of DSA locally, Young Democrats of Richmond County also, and just going to whatever events I can, helping organize things wherever I can, go to protests. And just, if I could translate those good intentions to policy and legislation, that would mean helping average people, marginalized groups, groups that have been forgotten, middle-class people and low-income people. So thank you. That's what I hope to do.
Thank you, Aidan. Michael?
Again, thank you for this forum. Really like the diversity of questions, more so than I think any forum so far. Touched on some great topics. Look, I would encourage everyone here, and between now and June 22nd, you have an opportunity to look at 9 candidates on the ballot. Line us up, look at our experiences, look what we're talking about we want to do, how we're going to do it, the relationships that exist. I will say that my 14 years in government, 5 years in nonprofit, have prepared me to hit the ground running on day one. I have had experience on all sides of forming the city budget for many years. And I will tell you that getting the fair share of the money that Staten Island deserves is always an uphill battle. And with the upcoming budget battles that we'll see, the budgets being smaller and smaller each succeeding year because of a decrease in tax revenue, it is going to be very hard for whoever has this seat with our colleagues in the Mid-Island and South Shore to fight for all we need. We're going to have to make partnerships across into other boroughs and do really hard work. So please make sure you make your decisions, rank us 1 to 5, get out there and vote on June 22nd. And I look forward to seeing everybody in person.
Thank you, Michael. And it's Amoy.
So a healthy democracy has options. And so I think it is a statement and a testament to our community that we see so many amazing candidates. I like the way Aidan put it. We're all well-intentioned community members. And I think that's a beautiful thing. One of the things that I always like to say is rising tides lift all boats. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm running for office because I truly believe that when you lift up the most disenfranchised in our community, you lift up everybody. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people understand that we all pay taxes, every single one of us. But a lot of times there's been a huge disconnect with how government and those tax-paying dollars get back to our community. That is the role of your elected official. They work for you. They are there to represent you and be your voice, and to make sure that we get the services and resources that our tax-paying dollars are already funding. And all too often, we're not seeing those services and those resources come back into our communities, and especially the communities that need it, which predominantly are Black and Brown communities, which are women, which are LGBTQ, which are people with disabilities. And I could go on and on and on again.
Thank you, Amoy. We'll hand it to Selina.
Thank you. Thank you for having this forum tonight. It was a great forum. I've been in the community for quite some time doing this work. And one of the things that this work has shown me is we can always do better. There's so much work that needs to be done. And given this pandemic, we need someone in office that's going to really hit the ground running, that has the knowledge and experience and the expertise and the connections to get stuff done. I really feel that I don't agree that we have all the services. We don't have all the money. We have to create more income, and not on the backs of working class people. We have to reallocate money to our budget to get the services that we need, because This pandemic has exacerbated a lot of the issues that currently exist, and now it's worse. When we get to the other side of this, we need somebody that's going to hit the ground running and get things done. I have the experience. I have the tenacity and the energy to hit the ground running on day one. I appreciate all of my colleagues on this call tonight. This is not easy. We're putting ourselves out there, and we just hope that you look at all of us and pick your best candidate 1 through 5. Thank you so much, and everybody have a blessed night.
Thank you, Selina. Hand it to John.
My name is John McBeth. I'm a third-generation Staten Islander, and I want to sit in the seat of this next city council as the next city council person representing all of us. I've worked with all of the people, most of the people here on this panel. I have a storied history that I don't want you to believe what I say or what my website says, but I want you to Google search all of us. So I want you to search the advanced pages for all of us and see what we've done over the years and what we've actually come to accomplish. I think that level of accomplishment, that my record would stand out as one of the people who really made a difference here on Staten Island and really brought forward a lot of the innovation that's going to be absolutely necessary for the next city council person. We have to be fast thinkers. We can't do things the traditional way. Things are going to change dramatically, and we have to be ready for that. I'm ready for it. My name is John McBeth. I hope to be your next city council person.
Thank you, John. Troy.
Thank you. And I want to thank Plead the Fifth. This was a great forum, and you guys should hire yourself out for anybody else wanting to do forums for the rest of this race. But with that being said, I'm a 20-year educator. I'm a mentor. I'm a high school basketball coach, and I've worked with the current council member for the last 7.5 years. I've been in communities. I understand their issues. I see their concerns, and I've been there connecting people and agencies of New York City for the last 7.5 years. I've done the work. I know what it takes. And as your next council member, I'll be ready to hit the ground running. I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of qualified people running for this council seat, and it's about what message people are sending out. I'm telling you right now, my message is about unifying the North Shore. My message is about bringing resources to the North Shore, and I am going to get it done for everyone on the North Shore.
Thank you, Troy. Hand it to Ranti.
Yes, and thank you for this amazing event. This is definitely one of the most, I would say, comprehensive forums. So I thank you guys. But here's what's at stake, guys. We're in a watershed moment in our nation's history in Staten Island. This is the moment. And we need to meet that moment by reimagining what leadership looks like. It looks like me, someone who's rooted in the community for over 20 years, someone who's not a pop-up activist, who doesn't come from the seat or close to the seat of power, right? And what I have, and I'm not knocking into my colleagues, a lot of my colleagues come from public offices or work near public offices. So they don't truly have the pulse of the community. I fill the gaps in my community that those offices don't. And I've done that for over 20 years. That's why we get a lot of lip service and not enough action. That's why infrastructure hasn't been addressed. Housing, healthcare, these issues still are not being addressed. We're talking about putting police in a park with people who have mental health issues and drug addiction. So now it's time to reimagine leadership and bring people and a person who's going to speak truth to power, and not just a person who's thinking from a city council seat because they're near the seat, but someone who's been rooted in the community and who's going to fight and never give up, and make sure that everyone has a seat at the table for the first time. Because even me, as the director of the Carter Center, right, that's providing all these services, I never felt valued. How much more for community members that need to feel valued and need their voices heard? It's time.
Thank you, Ranti. Hand it to Kelvin.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting us. I guess I'm the last to close it up. Listen, I appreciate you guys having us. I agree with my brother John, my colleague John. Google us. You're going to see the work we've been doing, not just because we're running for city council. Google me, you're going to go back to 2013, 2014. Ranti, same thing. Not, he said, use the word pop-up artist. I don't even know what that means. But listen, I'm running for city council because I'm a fighter. You know, I've been in criminal court as a public defender now for the past 9 years, fighting for the voiceless. I don't have to tell you. You know, if you live in certain zip codes, if you on the North Shore, when you get arrested in criminal court, you're treated differently when you live on the South Shore. I don't have to tell you, you know this. I'm running because I've been working with limited resources. As a kid, I was 9 years old. I found myself in a refugee camp in Ghana. My family fled a civil war. I had limited opportunity. I came here after high school to my dad. I live on Park Hill in public housing. I worked overnight and put myself through CSI. Then I had a scholarship, went to law school. I didn't work on Wall Street. I had offers to work on Wall Street. I said, no, I will be a public defender. And that's what I've been doing. I believe in the North Shore. I believe in our community. I'm a fighter. If you give me, Staten Island has always been considered a forgotten borough. We have limited resources. I know how to work with limited resources. And that's why I'm running. And thank you for hosting us tonight. And I hope you rank me on number one when you go and vote on June 22nd. Thank you all.
Well, a final thank you to the candidates. Once again, the New York City primary is Tuesday, June 22nd. I want to especially thank our viewers for tuning in tonight with us and engaging with us and the candidates. If you have not yet, we encourage you to read pleaforthefifth.com, sign up for our email newsletter, follow us on social media. Our podcast is on all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and others. And lastly, I want to encourage those who can to support our work by becoming a paid monthly subscriber. Your support allows us to expand our local coverage, and paid subscribers receive extra content. So once again, thank you for joining us this evening, and good night to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Have a good night, all. Thank you for coming.
Go
Have a
get
great
some
night. Stay safe, everyone.
Good night.